Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this Digital Analytics Program Learning Series webinar. We're really excited today to talk about tag managers and how you can use them to influence your analytics and also do many other things with them. My name's Tim Loudon. I'm the program manager for the Digital Analytics Program, and we have a special guest that will be joining us today, Kelly Holden, who is part of the Digital Analytics team at CFPB. And a little later on, she's going to come on and talk to us a little bit about how CFPB has used tag managers to improve their analytics and talk about some case studies of things they've done with it. Before we go forward and get fully into the swing of things here, I do want to note a few things. If you haven't had a webinar with us before, welcome. This will be recorded and eventually posted on our DigitalGov YouTube Analytics playlist, so you can always refer back to it there. We will be sending all the attendees the slides afterward, although there aren't too many slides for this particular webinar. It's a lot of demo. Also, there will be a question and answer period at the end of the webinar. And at any point during the webinar, feel free to put your questions in the questions box that's on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll try to answer them as we wrap up. Also, we'll be sending out a survey in the follow-up email with the slides and the resources from this webinar. Please fill out the survey. We do use all the information and we read all your answers so that we can improve this experience for you in the future. And finally, I just wanted to set the scene a little bit about expectations regarding what we're going to learn today. Tag managers, and we're going to demonstrate a little bit within Google Tag Manager, which is one of the options you can choose. But in general, they are not something that we can master in an hour, or even if we offered a 3-hour training. There's a lot of interesting things that you can do with tag managers. Today's webinar is not designed to get everyone to the level where they are going to be able to teach folks how to use them. It's more a basis of what their purpose is, what they can do, and how other agencies have used them. And then in the future, if you're interested in implementing a tag manager, we can surely help you with the analytics portion, but there's a wealth of information online as well for getting up to speed with whatever tag manager you choose to use at your agency. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and get started. So what do tag managers do? Well, basically what they do is they allow you to take various JavaScript tags and manage them from a central location. So as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen here, these are not actual script tags. This is a bit of pseudocode, but as you can see on your site, you might have various different script tags, and I've seen sites with dozens of script tags. So things that fire with JavaScript include the Google Analytics script that DAP uses, jQuery, heat mapping tools, A/B testing tools, feedback tools, plugins, ad tools. Lots of custom JavaScript probably are firing on your site to do specific things like make windows pop up or really all kinds of different aspects. And typically, you have to have all of these what they call a tag, the JavaScript tag, put in your HTML. And what a tag manager does is allows you to, instead of putting them in your HTML, put the script tags in the tag manager and control how they are fired, when they're triggered, and actually sort of customize some of them in some cases to your liking from a central location rather than doing it in the HTML itself. And what it does is allows you to take all of your former pieces of code, your script tags, and instead in your HTML have one container code. That's what we call a container. So this is an example of what a before and after might look like if you use, this is in particular is a Google Tag Manager container, but you can see previously took USA.gov as an example and went into their source code, and you can see they have lots of different JavaScript tags running, and this probably isn't all of them. And for those of you who are all watching right now, if you go to the site that you work on the most and you right click and view the page source and then do a search command and search for the word script, you'll find all kinds of JavaScript tags that you run yourself. What happens is afterward, all you need is this one container. Actually, in the case of Google Tag Manager, it's 2 pieces of code that you have to put in different places, but it's a container that then when your computer is basically running through the HTML, and it does this for those of you who are developers on the line, this is probably review, but the computer will read your HTML from top to bottom. And as it's going through, when it hits a container code, instead of firing specific scripts, it'll look into that container. It basically tells the computer what is currently being fired out of that container, and then it'll happen. That's a little bit nebulous right now, but it'll become more clear, I think. So based on that description, some of you are saying, so what? Why does that help me? What does that do? Big deal. We take a bunch of lines from our HTML and we put them in a container. How is that any different? It doesn't seem to matter to me. Well, here's an example of a case. Let's say you come into work one morning and your email box is exploding. The inbox has a bunch of people saying your site's crashing and they can't figure out why, but no one can access any of the content or maybe something more important than content on your site. And you realize that the night before you had done some sort of update on your site and you implemented some new piece of JavaScript. So it's bad news. Something in that JavaScript is not playing nicely and it's causing your site to crash. So this is a really, really big deal. My question to you is, this is a bit of a, it's rhetorical in the sense that you can't answer me, but I would like everyone to think about this. What would the process be at your agency to fix this issue? How long would it take? And why would it take that long? So all of you are thinking about that right now. Here are the things that come to mind when I think of a general, I don't want to say stereotype, but across many federal government websites that I've dealt with, here are the things that I think about. We need to find developer support. There's probably a production schedule that we're going to have to try to override. Most likely there's a contractor team that is doing development work that we're going to have to try to emergency contact and escalate this issue. These are all words that I think scare a lot of folks in government. But what's really awesome is that tag managers could solve this problem, because instead of having to find a developer or contact that contractor team that's managing that site, if a contractor team manages your site, you can have folks that have access to the tag manager user interface, and you could actually deactivate that particular piece of JavaScript without having to actually touch any of your HTML. So for all of you on the line right now that are thinking, you know, I'm savvy, I work on the site, but I'm not a developer, and actually messing with the HTML or even having access to changing things on the HTML is not something that comes easily to me. A tag manager might be able to provide a window for you to do things that previously developers had to do. So the bottom line is, tag managers allow non-developers to do developer-y things. And notice I have an asterisk there because it means, yes, you can still screw things up as well. So it needs to be taken seriously, but tag managers, I think, have a lot of benefit, not only for the management specifically of script tags, but also for the cool customizations you can do. So as I noted, all the script tags fire from a single user-friendly interface, and you're going to see one in a few moments when Kelly comes on, because she's going to show you what the Google Tag Manager interface looks like. At the end of the webinar, after Kelly's done, I'm going to actually show you how to implement the digital analytics program JavaScript tag via Google Tag Manager. So there's no need to touch your HTML to make changes. You can create custom events more easily, which is particularly important for analytics, is that there are specific sections of Google Tag Manager that are predefined for you to be able to define events. So as an example, let's say you have a form and you really want to track submissions of that form. If your button to submit has an ID that's like form submit, you can, in Google Tag Manager, configure it to fire a custom event anytime someone clicks that button. And you can do that because button clicks are a relatively easy thing, and it's done for you in Google Tag Manager. You can do it without having any developer actually code that JavaScript for you and put it in the HTML. It's relatively straightforward to do. And then you can also set trigger to fire tags to specific pages on specific, when certain classes or IDs are clicked. Various different really interesting ways that you can control how the JavaScript tags are fired. So in an example of something like a satisfaction survey, you can set the triggers to fire only for specific people or specific pages. So when we send you all this information and in the follow-up, you'll get these slides, and I included a link here for a description of various different tag management options. Like I said, today we're going to be looking at Google Tag Manager, but that's just one of them. I also know of other agencies that use a bunch of the other options, including Telium. I know Adobe offers one. I think this particular link that I send you to has 10 different tag management solutions that you can look at. Okay, that's an overview of pretty much what tag managers are and what they can do. But now for the much more exciting part of the webinar is to see how an agency has actually used Tag Manager, specifically in the realm of analytics. I'm going to pass it off to Kelly Holden, who works on the digital analytics team at CFPB. And I know that they've done some incredible work, and I'm really excited as well to see what they have done. So Kelly, we'll throw it over to you.
Hi, everybody. As Tim said, I'm Kelly Holden. I work at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau on the digital analytics team. And today I'm going to talk to you about how we collect the data on our site using Google Tag Manager. So before I get started into the nitty-gritty of Google Tag Manager, I kind of want to give you an oversight of how our web page is set up, what we offer on our web page, and how we're using that data after we've recorded it. So you can kind of consider using something like Google Tag Manager and the Google Analytics system as kind of a funnel. So you record everything in Tag Manager, and then all the data goes to Google Analytics, and then we actually do all our visualizations in either Tableau, which is a visualization tool outside of Google, and then Data Studio, which is the visualization tool that Google offers. So CFPB has a really large web presence, and we have multiple products for consumers to reference when making important financial decisions. So just a couple samples of that here. You can see this first page is for owning a home. So this kind of page helps people understand how to prepare to shop for a mortgage, how to explore different loan choices once they've decided to start looking for a home, how to compare loan offers, and then finally how to get ready to close their house. This next page is repay student debt. So this kind of helps any students that have taken out loans in helping them understand how they can pay those loans off better. It's kind of a decision tree, so you hit on this federal button or the non-federal button. It takes you to another question, and then at the end it gives you suggestions on how you can better pay off your loans. We have this other page called Ask CFPB, which is kind of a frequently asked financial questions section, and it'll answer anything from auto loans to families and money, mortgages. Any question you really have about any type of financial decisions that you're making are probably in Ask CFPB. And we have other tools in our site as well. Like this one is planning for retirement. So it helps you understand the benefits that you can get at different ages if you retired at certain ages. It shows you the benefits by age, and then it helps you understand the other questions that you should be asking to make the decision in the end. So yeah, so that's just kind of an idea of the different pages that we have on our site. And what we like to do is, or what we do is we actually record all that stuff in Google Analytics using Tag Manager. So as you know, most of you know that Google Analytics kind of on page load will collect stuff like page views and time on page and where the person's coming from, any referrals that they're coming from, anything like that. That's stuff's collected automatically once you put the Tag Manager code in. But the other stuff that I'm probably going to be spending more time on today is the event data. So everything that's recorded in Google Analytics was set up in Tag Manager. So let me just break down what an event actually is first in Google Analytics before we go any further. So an event actually always has three different sections in it. It has an event category, an event action, and an event label. So each event has these sections, and think of them kind of as umbrellas for each other. So the event category is the broadest section, and then the event label is the most defined. So let's go over an example of how we collect data for internal links on our site. So say you wanted to record something like anyone clicking on these links on the side here. When you go into Google Analytics, the way we've defined it is the event category is going to be internal link. And then once you click on this in Analytics, it's going to filter automatically for just internal links that are happening on the page or on the site. And then the event action is going to be the hyperlink text on the page. So in this example here, it would be get answers to mortgage questions from Ask CFPB. Let's just look at get started right now. And then the event label is going to be the hyperlink text of the URL that you're being sent to. So each of those parts kind of make up the event for each different thing that's happening on the page. So as I said, all this is collected in Google Analytics, but what good is it there if we can't actually share it with somebody? So we make our dashboards our product dashboards in Google or in Data Studio now. One of the things that we're trying to get people to think about when they're or product owners to think about when they're thinking about users interacting with their page is not just how they get there, but what they're doing once they get there. It's important that people are coming to the site, obviously, but it's also more important that they're doing the actions that we intend for them to do while they're there. So this dashboard here kind of breaks things down by the total users that are coming to the page, but it also breaks it down to the engaged users. And the engaged users are people who are doing the actions on the page that we intend for them to do. So in this example for the retirement page, which is this one here, it's anyone who clicks to get their estimates at the top. And if people are interested in seeing anything more broken down in these dashboards, we break down the events a little bit more on this last page. So you can see exactly what people are clicking on within it, so you can kind of like break down and have a pulse of exactly what's happening on the page. So let's back up to how we're actually recording this stuff. First, before I go into Google Tag Manager in more detail, I want to go over the pros and cons. So let's start with the pros. Some of the pros of using something like Tag Manager is that you have the power to record anything and everything on the page. Tim kind of alluded to this earlier, but if your site has a tool and you want to know how many people are using it, or you want to record all the actions they take on a certain page, or if you want to see if they click on a drop-down, or even if they click on a link or something like that, all that stuff can be recorded in here just by creating a tag. So it also takes the time down to record an event on the site from days or even weeks to hours. This is something that Tim also alluded to, is that it kind of alleviates the amount of work that developers have to do. So before, you had to request a certain event to be tracked by a developer, then they had to go in and they had to individually code each and every event that you wanted. They had to put in the event category, put in the event label, put in the event action, and then they had to republish the page before you could record any data. And if you wanted to change anything on that page, they had to go back in and they had to make those changes again. The process now is that you can find what you want to track on the page, you create a tag, and then you publish, and then you can start recording right away. One of the other things that's really important about using a container code, again, something that Tim alluded to earlier, was that you can inject all the other tools that you're using Tag Manager. So we've actually used the Tag Manager system to inject our A/B testing code, which is Optimize, and our heat mapping tool, which is Crazy Egg. So instead of having to, again, put the JavaScript on those pages, you can just put it into the container or into Google Tag Manager, and then it's going to be injected on the page via the container code. So some of the cons about working with a tag management system like Google Tag Manager, one of the biggest ones, and I know I said this for a pro, but it's also a con, you have the power to record anything and everything. We learned the hard way that not everything should be captured on the page. One example of that is that we had a page timer that fired every 20 seconds on a page, and it was sending so much data that when we tried to pull it through the API, it would either take forever, like hours, or it would just break, and we weren't able to get any of the data out. So you can imagine that was kind of a mistake that we learned from. And you just have to keep in mind, like, is this something that's going to kind of overload the amount of data that we're going to get, or is it something that's going to really help us out? The other thing is you just have to remember to test and test and test and test before you're publishing something live. Just remember, once an event goes live, that data is there to stay. So when you create a tag, I actually highly suggest, because we use it, that you send the data to a sandbox account first, and then after a few days of recording that data and making sure that everything is exactly how you expect it to be, you can move it over to your live site. Another con is that GTM, the container code, can be really tricky to implement. So a lot of tag management systems like to tout that once you have this tag management system in place, you don't have to work with developers anymore. You don't necessarily get to completely cut ties with developers when you start using a tag management system. I actually talk to developers, and I work with developers really closely when it comes to more complicated tags that we want to be capturing data on, like any of the tools that we're doing on a regular basis. So I'll actually show some of that a little bit later. And that's really because they're doing it with more complicated JavaScript, which is a little bit out of my league. And last but not least, there's definitely a learning curve when you're using a tags management system, but it's definitely worth it. Don't get frustrated if it takes some time for you to understand how a tag needs to be put together to start working. I promise it's going to be worth it when you finally get it done. Just to give you an example, it took us a couple months to get everything kind of up and running and exactly how we wanted before all of our, basic tags were up and running. And I'm still working on tags today. We are going to go over today a couple different tags that I've set up. So before we start getting into it, I'm actually going to start building a tag, or I'm going to show you how I built this tag up right now, this answer ratings tag. And I want to go over the different parts of it. So there's 3 different parts that are really important. I consider them kind of the building blocks of a tag. It's called the tags, the triggers, and the variables. So the first part of this is what we're looking at right now, and it's called the tag. So right now, I'm going to go over this example, this answer ratings example. What we want to be capturing is, say on this page, we wanted to capture if somebody was clicking yes or no to was this page helpful to you. We need to set up the tag first. So when you go here, you can see the tag is set up, and that's what's going to be sending your data to Google Analytics. So in here, you're going to define the event category, the event action, and the event label that you're going to see when you go into Google Analytics. So you can see here, I set it up to be the category is page interaction, the action is answer ratings, and the event label is this thing called the inner text. So you can see there, that's actually a variable. Anything that's in those curly brackets is going to be a variable that I'm going to be going over later. But just know that right now that the inner text is actually the text that's on the page. So if you right-click and inspect on this element right here, the inner text is going to be this word yes right here. And for the no, it's going to be the word no right there. So now you have your tag set up, but you need to be able to fire it on the right things. So you want to make sure that you're only firing on things that you're that you want it to be firing on. So every time you click on something, it's not firing something. So right now, the page is kind of being listened to. So everything on the page, every event that happens, here I'll actually show you. Every event that happens on the page, if you look on this left-hand side, is being listened to. So every time I click on anything, even if it's not actually connected to a link or something, is being listened to. But if you actually look into it, nothing's being fired on these events because I haven't set anything up to be fired on those events. What I want to be firing on is if somebody's clicking right here in this radio button or right here in this radio button. So the way I have to do that is I have to set up a trigger. If it hears the right thing, it's going to fire the tag. So in here, you're going to define what the event you want to record actually is. So is it a link click? Is it a drop down? Is it a page view? Any of that type of stuff. So this is the trigger that I'm using for this event. If you look here, it says that the element class equals CF input label. The element class is actually, if you look at the page, again, inspect on the page, you can see the class for both the yes and no is the same thing. It's CF input label. Just remember when you're making these triggers that you need to be broad enough to capture all the things that you want to capture. So for instance, all the answer ratings on the site, but you also want to be specific enough that you're not capturing more stuff. So if you use something like just CF input, this up here is also CF input, so you might capture more stuff than you're actually interested in. And the last part of the tag is the variables. So variables are really, really important because they're actually used on a lot of in both tags and triggers. In the tag, you can use the variable to say something like, I want the event action to always be the hyperlink text on the page, or you can use it for saying something like, I want the event label to always be the URL the link is sending somebody to. And this way you can make one tag that works for all link clicks on the entire site instead of having to make a new tag for each and every link click site-wide. And then when it comes to the trigger, you could use them to describe the thing you're actually clicking on. So in this example, we wanted to say we only want it to happen when when you're clicking on a certain element on the page. So just when you hit those yes or no radio buttons for inputs. So right now we have this tag set up with everything here. Oh, one other thing that I want to go over too, that's really important, is in this place right here, this tracking ID spot, I have another variable. I'm going to go over what this variable means, but right now just know that that's just my ID for my analytics account. So when we want to test this, all we have to do is hit the preview button up here, and then automatically, if your page has a has the container code on it, when you refresh the page, this console at the bottom is gonna come up. So this is going to help you figure out exactly like what's going on the page, and if any of it'll help you troubleshoot any of the tags that you're making. So one really nifty trick that I learned that's not really necessary here, but will help if you're trying to capture link clicks and you want to check your tags, is I right click and look at the console, and then you put in this code for, if you're using jQuery, this will stop any links from happening on the page. So when you click on a link and you're trying to test it, it won't send you to a new page. So for example, if you clicked on this link here, you can see that two tags fired. One is to our account specifically, and then the other one is to the Digital Analytics Program account. But let's test this answer rating once. So when you click the yes button, you can see this click happened here, and voila, our answer ratings is working. And when you look at the actual parts of the tag itself, you can see this in the properties, you'll see exactly what's being sent to Google Analytics, just as we expected. The event category is page interaction, the event action is answer ratings, and the event label is yes. And then you can see down here, this is what fired it. So anything, if you have all the green checks, that means that the firing rules worked. So I promised that I would go a little bit more into variables. We're going to go over another tag to go over that a little bit better. So variables are really, really important. As I said, they're the building blocks for both the tags and the triggers. When you first start your account, you're going to have a bunch of built-in variables that are really, really helpful. You can use them to look at the click classes if you're trying to build a trigger and you want to say, I want this to fire on this class. Click elements, click IDs, a lot of different stuff in here that's really useful. But what if there's something that you know you want to be recording, but it doesn't have a built-in variable yet? So the example that we're going to use right now is this sign up button up here. So say I wanted to capture whenever somebody clicked on this button. To figure out what I want to fire that on, I go to sign up and then I right click. And I can see here that the class equals button, but there's probably a lot of stuff on the site that has a class equaling button. The type equals submit, but again, there's probably a lot of stuff on the site that has that. But the one that I know is only going to be there for email signups is this value, which equals the email signup. Right now, there's no built-in variable that's going to tell us what the email signup is or what the value is on the page. So we need to create one. And in comes custom variables. The most important custom variable that I'm going to be talking about the most here, especially for non-developers, is the data layer variable. This variable will broaden the amount of information you can use within the DOM, which is the document object model, which is this part here, to the point where you can virtually use anything within the page to create a tag. Let's go back to where I'm at here. What I want to be firing on is the element value. So what I have to set up, or what I've already set up, is the data layer variable, custom variable. And it looks a little, it doesn't really make sense when you're looking at it right now, but let me just break this down for you. So you're always going to, when you're making a data layer variable, you're always going to start out with this gtm.element. That basically is saying it's something for tag manager, it's an element within the page, and then this .value is just saying I want the value within the element itself. So once you set that up, you put it in the trigger here. So this trigger is saying element value that matches regular expression, which is basically just saying the wildcard, either the word subscribe or the word sign up. And then when you preview this event, if you go back to this page here, when you click on this event right here, the sign up happens right here. So again, this is the information that's being sent to Google Analytics, and the firing trigger that it worked on was this one right here, the V1 sign up email that we set up with the element value being signed. So that's kind of a broad overview of the simpler types of tags that we use on our page. But we do have a lot of other really interesting ones. I'm just going to show you some of the stuff that happens on one of our more complicated tools. So as I said before, we work with developers to create tags using JavaScript a lot so that we can capture stuff on more complex stuff like this page right here. If you go to the dropdown and you click Delaware, this event on the side, owning a home, rate tool interactions, is going to come up. And the data that's sent to Google Analytics is owning a home, rate tool interactions, the event action is select state, and the event label is Delaware. And that works for the entire part of the, all parts of the page. So any dropdown that you do, if you use the slider, anything like that, that information is going to be collected in Analytics, and that's through a custom JavaScript code. So if you're interested in any of that type of stuff or any more complicated information, please feel free to reach out to us. We can kind of walk you through, you know, what kind of stuff or who you need to be talking to or what you should be asking for. So that's pretty much it. And with that, I will hand it back over to Tim.
Great. Thanks so much, Kelly. That was a really, really awesome demonstration of the kinds of things you can do. I do want to note a couple things after watching that, because I know some of you are sitting at home being like, that was in a different language. And if that was the case, I just wanted to reiterate that that's okay. We do not expect that you can walk out of this webinar and be able to implement all the things Kelly just showed you. But I think what she did show us was that it was a really good demonstration of the kinds of things that you can do, especially with custom events using Google Tag Manager. And I have a couple other comments. Number one, Kelly, I'm sure a bunch of people are going to follow up with you to try to get that stop links code that you use so that it actually doesn't change when they're getting a tag firing. But also, I wanted to note that I really appreciated the comment that Kelly made regarding the fact that there's a lot of data that you don't necessarily need, and that maybe CFPB learned that they were collecting too much at first. So as you guys probably could see, or maybe if you didn't notice in the top left-hand corner, Kelly was showing you a bunch of things that they were doing with their independent Google Analytics account that they maintain at CFPB. She wasn't sending all that data specifically to the DAP account. That said, you can send events to the DAP account, and I'm going to show you how to implement the DAP tag, which is the base level of how to get the DAP analytics code running with Google Tag Manager on your site. But I want to caution that we have a very large account, and if you, for example, have a website that gets 50 million page views a week, and you want to try to implement an event that records for every single click, you're going to have me knocking at your door asking that you stop doing that, because it'll just be too much data and it'll be overloading our system. So if you have things like button clicks that you want to test, I think the radio example for the yes, no, did this page help you is a great example of an event that you could code and send it to the DAP account. If you have something that's going to be contributing a really massive amount of data, I would recommend that you actually send it to your own independent account rather than in the DAP account. And for those folks that are wondering what that threshold might be, I'd be happy to talk about it if you email us after this. But what I want to do now is show everyone how they can implement specifically the DAP tag if they were using Google Tag Manager, and how easy it can be. So I have a couple accounts that are already set up right now. Okay, so I have a couple Google Tag Manager accounts that that I'm part of, and for those of you that are familiar with DAP, you know that we manage analytics.usa.gov. So you would create an account, and you can just name the container, and then what happens when you're in the container is you start out here, and you guys saw this with Kelly's example, but what happens is you get, if you look right here where I'm circling, we have this GTM specific code, and if I click on that, it shows you the two pieces that you need to implement the container. One of them needs to go in the header, and one of them needs to go in right after the body tag. So that's something that you probably will need your developers to do if you don't actually touch the HTML on your site, but that's how you implement the code itself. So then we would say, create a new tag. And one thing that I wanted to mention here, and we can actually name it, this is just going to be a duplicate, but I'll say DAP custom tag. And you can see that we have to set the tag and the trigger. So one of the things that's a little bit different about the DAP implementation of Google Analytics is that because it's not quote unquote out of the box, it's a customized implementation, and it's done specifically so that you actually get some automatic events tracking. So all the events that you guys currently see in your DAP interface, as in outbound links, downloads, mail to clicks, telephone clicks, outbound downloads, all that stuff that comes by default with the DAP code, it will still fire when you do what I'm about to show you without having to set up any custom stuff in GTM. And then any events that you set up after that will be on top of the ones that are already provided by DAP. So if you were using just a normal implementation of Google Analytics, you could just click the tag type here for Universal Analytics. But because DAP is customized, we actually have to go down here and click Custom HTML. So I'm going to click Custom HTML, and then the rest of it is pretty simple. The code that you would put on your actual, in your HTML that would call the DAP script, we're just going to drop it in here instead of in the HTML. And so if you go to our GitHub repo, we have our recommended script that you can take, and I'm just going to copy and paste that. Oops, I went too far. We actually don't need that commented out part. There we go. And I can paste it right here. Notice that in our example on the GitHub repo, we don't include the specific agency. So if this were going to be on analytics.usa.gov, it's a GSA site, and I would input agency equals GSA. For those of you that are more familiar with implementation of DAP, all of your parameters will still work. If you have custom parameters for sub-agency or for subdomain override or any of the interesting options that you can turn on and off in our query string parameters, those will still work. But basically, I just put it in like that, and then I need to set a trigger. So we can choose page view, and basically what that does is you can see this trigger fires on all page views. So every time a page loads, this trigger will fire. And what that does then, in essence, it says every time a page loads, run the Google Analytics JavaScript so that we can collect data. And that's it for setting up the DAP specific tag. Then once you have that, you can see I've got it here twice because it's already set up. As Kelly showed you, you can go into preview mode, and you could go here, and you can see it fired actually twice, the one that we use normally and the one that I just set up right now. So you don't want to do this particular thing because it fires twice. That would record 2 hits if you published this particular tag. I'm going to delete it once this is over, but you can see how easy it is. So from there, that's all you have to do to start recording. So the steps are basically get the container put on your site, remove the old DAP script, and then create a new DAP tag in GTM and publish it to your GTM container. And once you do that, you're already getting everything that you currently have with DAP, including all the custom events and any of the query string parameter options that you've turned on in your script tag. Then you also have the ability after that to do any of the custom events that, like the examples that Kelly showed you. So it's really, really simple to implement. And The other thing is, don't forget, if you have a bunch of different tools that are running on your site, if you're one of the few government agencies that uses AdWords, for example, or if you have an A/B testing tool or a customer satisfaction tool or something like that, you can create tags with that custom HTML, or there's a lot of them that are pre-programmed into GTM. So you can see there's featured ones, and then there's all kinds of different things. Crazy Egg is right there. So they're already Hotjar. They're already configured so that you can basically just put in your ID number for that specific thing, and it'll work. Like I said, with DAP, the first time you need to use the custom HTML. If you wanted to make a custom event tag after that, you don't have to use custom HTML anymore. What you can do is then use Universal Analytics and input the DAP specific tracking ID. And I actually also have a variable set up for that so that I don't have to remember it all the time. I think it's in here somewhere, DAP UAID. So all that means is that we went into variables and took our specific UAID and made it a variable so we don't have to keep copying and pasting it all the time. So that's how you could then set up an event that would fire and send it to the DAP account. But the first time has to be a custom HTML. All right, so we're at a little less than quarter to the hour, and I think at this point we can go ahead and take questions. Let me see what we've got here. So far we have 4 questions, so anyone else that has questions, go ahead and send them in now. Let me just go ahead and take a look at these. Okay, this is a great question. So the first question is, the federal DAP Google Analytics is an application used by a number of agency users. Will we also have access to a centrally used federal DAP tag manager to take advantage of these tagging and reporting capabilities? So the answer to that is currently it's not available, but it's definitely something that could be available in the future. So right now, the Google Tag Manager implementations would be managed at the agency level, so your specific agency would create an account. I do want to note that one of the other cons of using Tag Manager is the fact that if you have trouble with your Google Analytics reporting via DAP and you contact us and you're using Tag Manager, it makes it much harder for us to troubleshoot because it's a little bit of a black box. We can't see your implementation and your HTML, and since we won't have access to your specific Tag Manager tool, it'll make it a bit harder, but weighing that out is a good thing. Regarding if in the future we might have a federal tag manager, that's something that's definitely been discussed, but can't guarantee and don't know if that will happen. Currently, the situation is all agencies manage their own tag manager systems on their own, and you can use the DAP tag in it. Okay, the next question. Who are the content editors and who enters this content? It sounds great, but definitely requires some tech knowledge for the content editor. I would say that's a very accurate assumption. It really depends on, like, for who would manage your Google Tag Manager account, it very much depends on how your agency is structured. Some agencies have folks that work specifically on analytics or on A/B testing tools, things like that. Other agencies are not as fortunate to have someone who is designated to do that. As Kelly noted, there definitely is a learning curve, but there's a lot of information that's available online to help, and it would be, whoever you can find at your agency that's willing to take this on would be the person that would manage it, I suppose. Someone requested the stop links code to be sent afterwards. So Kelly, I'll definitely ask you to send me that and we can send it in the follow-up.
Yep, we can definitely do that.
We have another request to include the GitHub link to Google Analytics, to the DAP repo. I can surely send that as well. Here's an interesting question. Should you send custom event data to a Sandbox Google Analytics account in addition to firing it on a Sandbox version of your website to keep test data out of your main GA account? I would say that that's definitely a good practice. While you are learning GTM especially, and Kelly, you can probably vouch for this, but I definitely think while you're in the learning curve, it's a good idea to not only have a dummy Google Analytics account, but also have a testing environment for your pages. Kelly, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, all I can say is that I completely agree. One of the things you have to keep in mind is you're obviously using this to collect information, but Google Tag Manager, there's a lot of power in your hands. So you really want to make sure that you have a sandbox environment to be kind of testing stuff out and test the waters in. So yeah, using a dummy page is a great practice when you first start.
Great, thanks, Kelly. I think there's only one more question so far, and it's, can you recommend some good resources for non-developers to learn more about using JavaScript events as triggers for Tag Manager? I mean, I definitely have some opinions on that, but Kelly, how do you educate yourself on JavaScript? What do you do?
So I actually have quite a few different places that I can send people. I can send links later explaining exactly kind of technologically heavy areas that I go to and less technically heavy areas that I go to. A lot of blogs. Simo Ahava is one of the people I go to the most. He does a great job with his GTM blog. He keeps it up a lot, and he's always putting information in there that I'm learning new stuff in. So
Yeah,
I will send out some links.
I think anytime I've tried to look up anything for GTM just on Google.com, I'm immediately redirected to Simo's blog. He's got most of the answers. And
He's got
the
everything.
person that asked this question, um, I kind of had the same question myself because I think JavaScript is something that even if you have a basic knowledge of, it can really help you a lot, especially when you're working in the analytics realm. And being that, despite the fact I'm the program manager, I'm also not a developer. I'm actually taking a JavaScript course right now, just so I can brush up a little bit and be able to, you know, if not code the things myself, understand what's happening when I look at them. So I think there are a lot of free places out there where you can go and try to put yourself through some training. And Kelly, we definitely look forward to the links that you send us as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I don't see any more questions coming in. So I think at this point we can wrap up. We're a couple minutes early. I just want to rehash. We're going to send a follow-up that's going to contain the slides as well as a satisfaction survey for this webinar, and we really hope that you fill that out. We're going to get some links from Kelly about places that you can look for JavaScript information. We're also going to get the stop links code that Kelly showed us that she put in while she was in the debugging mode, and we'll send you the link for our analytics playlist where we have all of our training. That was a mouthful. With that, we wish you all a wonderful rest of the week, and thank you again for attending the webinar. And Kelly, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Have a good one, everyone.